Morning, colleagues, and welcome to this meeting of the Midlothian Safer Communities Board. Can I have a note of any apologies, please?
Chair, apologies from Councillor Baxter.
Thanks. And the order of business?
It's printed in the agenda.
Okay. Have we any declarations of interest? No. Okay. Which takes us to the minutes of the meeting of the 14th, the 18th of February. Get any points or questions to the minute? Happy to approve? Sorry, Kevin.
Sorry, Chair. Just in terms of the minutes at page 4 at 3A, the decision was that we would seek to share information with our fire service colleagues in regards to houses in single occupancy because of the prevalence of fire incidents in those households. And since then, we have been working through revenues with Colin Bruce at the fire service, so that the information will be supplied by this week.
Thanks, Kevin. With that, we're happy to note the minute. Okay, thanks. Just before moving on to the, I suppose, the more substantive items of our agenda, could I maybe just, there's a few new faces in the room today, could I maybe just ask if we do a quick round the room to say who we are and who we represent. I'm Councillor Owen Thompson, the Chair of the Safer Communities Board.
Kevin Anderson, Head of Customer and Housing Services, Midlothian Council.
I'm John Dickey. I'm the Area Commander for the City of Edinburgh. I'm also now looking after Mid and East Lothian and Scottish Borders in the absence of Peter Heath on day-to-day operational matters and other strategic matters.
Dean Mack, Local Commander for Eastern Midlothian.
Rosie Kendall, Community Safety and Estates Manager.
I'm Julie Watson, the Operations Manager at Women's Aid Eastern Midlothian.
I'm Margaret Brewer, Criminal Justice Service Manager, and Rob Strachan is just coming in with, who's the convener of the Chief, what are you, Rob? Chief Officer of the Community Justice Authority.
Councillor Joe Wallace.
You want him back? Okay. Councillor Peter de Vink.
Jill Imrie, I'm the Divisional Commander.
Michelle Ritchie, I'm the Sector Inspector of the Community Inspector for Dalkeith. However, today I'm deputising for Chief Inspector Jim Roy in the Local Area Command.
And George Wilson, representing the voluntary sector.
Okay, that takes us on then to item 5, a local policing plan update.
Okay, thank you, Chair. We did discuss the local policing plan at the previous meeting, and certainly we're now, well, today really at the year end. This is the start of year 2 for Police Scotland, so I'm presenting the final draft of the local policing plan for the formal endorsement by members today. There has been a great achievement over the course of the year, and the plan sets out our intentions for the year to come. I've got a performance report to which I'll speak in the next item, if that's in order. Certainly the priorities are very much in keeping with the needs and the wishes of local communities and councillors. We've done wide consultation to arrive at the priorities. You'll see that there are 7 priorities in the plan. There's tackling substance misuse, protecting people, reducing violence, road safety, antisocial behaviour, serious organised crime and housebreaking. So the 2 new ones, certainly from last year, are in respect of the drug dealing, local drug dealing, which we did touch on last time, and also the acquisitive crime, the break-ins, and in this area particularly rural crime, which again we referred to last time, and we've certainly seen that that's an issue that we need to put resources towards in the year to come.
Thanks very much. The Council did have this item on its agenda last week and an opportunity to discuss. It's on our agenda today to sign off. This board is the formal sign-off point for the local police plan. So, are there any questions or comments to the update of the police plan, or are we happy to sign off and agree the local police plan for the year?
Not so much questions, but a number of points. First of all, I think the plan is really quite outstanding and very thorough in its amount. I'm very impressed by the fact that they are taking such preventive measures as the Easter, not uprising, the Easter events that are likely to increase all kind of lawlessness, and that is being addressed imaginatively and impressively. The one thing that I still am concerned about is there is a lot of talk about the communities, but I just wonder how much commitment there is to policing in the community. It looks great on paper, but we have seen quite significant reductions in the number of community officers. Each ward now has only got one community officer. If that particular community officer goes on a course or on something else, there is no one to really fill in for him or her other than somebody from a local community, from another ward. And I think, in a way, that is a pity, because I feel we should have two community officers that fall in when people are unable to do their job, rather than rely on people from another ward, because we're really very, very short. When in the olden days one had two police officers, now there's only one. This is something that I would like to see addressed, and I would love to hear from both Jill and Michelle what they think about that.
Thank you. Well, that's section 6 of the report that Chief Inspector Royan submitted. There's an explanation about there has certainly been a change and a restructure to our community policing resources, and the councillor is correct that that has meant a reduction in the form of specific officer allocated per ward. But what it's meant is that there's a creation of a community tasking team for the local area, and in reality it's a 60%, over 60% increase of resources that are actually addressing local problems. It is a difference in the way in which the resources are structured, but it's by no means a departure from or a dilution of commitment to community policing. I said last time that is absolutely at the heart of certainly the Police Scotland plan and my own background. It's something to which I'm really committed. The changes, we are very interested to see how they are manifesting on the street and what the feedback is, so I'll take the councillors' feedback, but I hope that in time people will see that the creation of this community tasking team means that that actually enhances and augments the community ward officer to create a bigger team of resources that is tasked to address local issues. And the whole ethos of that change is to provide more officers at the times when we saw that the demand was coming from communities. So, you know, typically early, late evening, when actually some of the officers to whom the councillor refers were traditionally more a sort of day shift, Monday to Friday, but we've taken some posts and put them together with posts from response in order to create this community tasking team, which is actually more emphasis on community policing as opposed to less.
Yeah, I think that is the key, and it's an important issue that perhaps some of the communities need to be getting a bit more aware of, is that although there's only one named person essentially per ward, that there is a bigger pool of a police resource available to tackle the community policing aspects. I don't know, Peter, do you want to come back in? Or?
No, look, I am not a critic. I mean, I am a cheerleader for the police. I think they do a wonderful job. But I also realize that they, to a great extent, have enormous pressure on them. And I was disappointed when in Ward 6 we have a very competent community police officer, Emma what's his name? Tom
Smith.
Emma Smith. And when she went to college for 3 weeks, there was no one really to step into her shoes other than another very competent guy, Keith McQuaid, who is really the neighbouring Ward 6 police officer. And the point that I'm trying to make is that really when people are off for 3 weeks, that's a long time. And I just feel there ought to be a better system than just getting the local ward, or the ward next door, to take that job on. I would much prefer to see a reserve community police officer do that job. Because if we have 6 wards, let's face it, they will always be one of them that will be away on courses or the college or whatever, on holiday, and that needs to somehow be addressed, I feel.
Yeah, I do. I understand what's being said. I mean, I would just refer to my earlier comments that actually we've got a bigger pool of officers to call upon in those situations. I don't think that was just in the past month that abstraction took place, but clearly we'll see how this change works. That is absolutely the intention. The intention couldn't be further from any dilution of the commitment. In fact, it is completely designed for the opposite effect. It's designed to actually provide more resilience and more support to local community priorities.
Thank you. Thanks. Colleagues, we have the update, and we also have the plan itself at item 6, so we're happy to agree both of these items and to essentially sign off the police plan for 2013-14. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. That then takes us to item 7, which is the Community Policing Team Activity Summary. 39 to 45.
39.
I'm going to cover this, Councillor Thompson. Yeah, we've enjoyed, I mean, there's a regular feature, haven't we? In a time of change, we've actually enjoyed this community policing team for a considerable amount of time now. And it's testament to the work that they are doing is reflected in their performance report. How they are tasked on a weekly basis makes sure that they are very responsive to the changing needs of what the communities require, whether that be for national campaigns such as Operation RAC, which is our campaign against housebreaking, or whether it's more low-level needs for party houses or other antisocial and areas of disorder. They're very resilient and they're able to be tasked on a weekly basis. And clearly there's members of Midlothian Council and our partners in the fire service who are able to assist around there and have a positive problem-solving approach to how we go about that. And some of the returns that we've had, which is seen in the report that they've submitted, you can see that, just to reiterate, where our intelligence and where our information is coming to stop the right people at the right time. You know, we've had 15 positive drug searches and 23 negative, so we are stopping the right people at the right time in the right place. And just to maybe break down some of the aspects of the report in terms of the killed and seriously injured on the roads, the section for the road traffic shows number of Road Traffic Act fixed penalty tickets. That number there includes things like seatbelt offences, mobile phone offences. It's a range of offences that they're tackling there. But you can see the range of work that they cover, and at the back of the report just covers some of the significant incidents of note. And I think some of these, this is really where the Midlothian Community Action Team starts servicing the continuing, I suppose, questions from the community, some of the low-level annoyance in terms of off-road vehicles, which continues to sort of blight us in Midlothian. We can see there that we've traced outstanding motorbikes. We have had regular complaints of which people have been charged and bikes have been seized. We've searched areas which are known to be dumping grounds for disused bikes, and we've had some success there also. and also the associated offences that come with people driving off-road bikes in terms of disqualified driving. So that's just a flavour of the type of work that they do, and as you can see, it is a range of things. Maybe some of the other points that we've not stressed there is, they are a continuity to deal with our licensed premises on a week-to-week basis to offer a continuity in that respect. And they also provide a regular forum to check on antisocial behaviour orders, that people aren't breaking their curfews or the terms of those orders. And I can agree with Mr De Vink that looking forward, they do look forward. We look at analysis of where we can anticipate problems. Easter predominantly is a time for that to happen, and we've got a campaign in place. And similarly for a rural crime initiative, they'll be heavily involved in that through, they're able to enjoy quad bikes and other off-road bikes in the pursuit of any crime in amongst that. I'm happy to take any questions on the report.
On that very first page, I find it difficult to understand. Drugs, brackets, persons, plus VE, minus VE. What does it really mean? Sorry about being so stupid.
No, not at all. That's a very sort of policey term, isn't it? But it's just positive and negative. A positive search means you've searched someone and you've found drugs. A negative would be you've searched someone and you haven't found drugs.
The difference between the two, I just am not grasping it. One is plus 15.
There's been 38 stop and searches.
Yes.
There's been 38 stop and searches. 15 were found with stuff on them. 23 against.
Yes.
23 had nothing.
I'm just thick. Explain it afterwards.
Could I just ask for a comment on there's been a lot of criticism in the press recently about the stop and search policy that's been carried out through Scotland, and how reliable they can be on the figures that have been produced. Could you care to comment on the bad reporting that's going on?
Well, I think the national press is obviously, the Police Scotland is something of a kind of visual aid really for whatever vein of politics an article is seeking to pursue, and stop and search is an obvious kind of issue to arrive at that, depending on people's view, is regarded as a really good development or the opposite. In this area, we have actually got one of the higher rates of positives. So it means out of the total of people that we're stopping, we are just shy of 20% positive searches. So that might not always be for drugs, it might be for offensive weapons and knives. But the whole ethos is that as an organisation and here locally, that we target the right places, the places that communities tell us and we can see for ourselves where people are congregating, where there maybe are issues of violence, hotspots, community intelligence about low-level drug dealing, people going about at different hours of the day and night. So we would put patrols in there, and stop and search is definitely a useful tactic. It's not the only tactic, but it's a really useful one to use where you're trying to actually prevent issues escalating. So you'll see in other figures that become increasingly confusing actually, that there are some where there are consensual searches and some statutory searches. And that really means that if an officer has a reason to suspect someone's carrying a knife or carrying drugs, and there'll be various reasons why they would arrive at that suspicion, they can search under specific legislation. But if they're patrolling an area that has got a reputation for disorder and they see a group of, and let's just be stereotypical and say youths, they can approach and engage and chat with young people and ask them if they would be willing to subject themselves to a search, and invariably they do. And in actual fact, the people who are most likely to be victims of knife crime are kids at the hands of other kids. So when it's presented to young people as actually this is to keep you safe as well, and then you hopefully undermine that whole culture of I'm going to take a knife in case someone else has got a knife. Well, if you try and get underneath that and get no one to take a knife with them, then they don't need to give that I'm only carrying it to protect myself, and actually something that would have been, you know, a black eye turns out to be really serious and even fatal.
Yeah, I know the press would like that to be the 38 searches, you had 38 positives.
Yes.
I think the opposite. I'd rather have 38 negatives because you've targeted these people sufficiently to say they will not do these things. That's what I'd like to see the figures going. And knowing, as the press would say, 100 searches, we have 100 captures. What's the point in that? You know, it's not doing the job it's intended to do and prevent these people from carrying offensive weapons and drugs.
Do you have a target at all about the proportion it should be positive or negative in any way?
We are going to have a target going forward, which is, I believe, will be nationally 20%. But what there is not a target for is the actual volume, because what we're trying to do is really what the councillor said. We're trying to go to the right places at the right time. Ultimately, if it's successful, then you should see that percentage of positive returns decrease. But what we're trying to strike that balance between the preventative aspects and actually detecting people who are carrying drugs and who are carrying offensive weapons. So the Chief has been very clear that we will not have a target for the volume of searches, because we don't want to distort police activity. We want officers to be using this as one of a number of tactics that they have to patrol and police effectively in local areas. But we're trying to give an indication of the success of that activity by saying we should have a portion of those searches that actually do find something.
Sorry, coming back on that key performance indicator, you have got 11 people that you checked their curfew on and they were not traced. Have you hung them? What have you done about them? The 11.
And that's in relation to domestic.
This one.
Bill curfews.
The curfew check. And
yeah.
They were not traced.
Yeah, I can answer that. They wouldn't be physically traced, as in, but a report would go to the fiscal in terms of their breach of their curfew.
That's all you can do.
Yeah, that would be the normal reporting mechanism for that.
Oh.
Could I maybe ask for a bit more detail on what you mean in the surge and seal in the Operation Rack, the high volume? Sort of what's the thinking behind that, I suppose?
This was a recent way that we tackled some of the issues around Operation Rack, and it was really to have an intensely focused area, whether it be Lone Head or a more narrow focus than that, and to make sure that officers were sort of in the streets for egress and entry, so that and had officers patrolling through. And that was just a means to try and identify people who may be in vehicles that make off or start moving out of that area once the police start moving in. It was a means to capture them and make sure that we weren't missing any opportunities for not just detection, but also for prevention.
Is that the first that you've undertaken, that sort of exercise? It's certainly not something I'm aware of before.
It's got a quite sexy term, isn't it, search and search and seal, so I think it might be something we can continue on with, but it's early stages. We've had one at the weekend, so we can look to see how useful a tactic that is going forward.
You'll analyse the outcomes from that. And
yeah.
Have we any other questions or comments on the activity summary? We're happy to accept that report. And
I really don't want to be a bore, but the one issue in the report that I feel is so important and having just recently had a very unfortunate experience myself, is this whole issue of rural crime. The rural crime is no longer funny. It is really taking the floor from underneath the farmers. They have a very tough time. Westminster has kept £230 million out of Scotland's CAP payments. They're struggling like nothing on earth. And then when you have your fuel stolen, your vehicles stolen, metal stolen, sheep stolen, it's just unreal. And I am a member of the NFU Scotland, and my telephone is every day I get a message about yet another theft that took place on a farm, either in West Lothian, Midlothian, or in the Fife area. That's all that I'm getting the information on. Other areas of Scotland, I don't get that. But it really troubles me to see how often, at least once a day, I have a message that something has been stolen and that we should be aware. There is now talk about vigilante groups amongst the farmers. It really is much, much more serious. Now, I know that Kenny McGaskill is taking this at heart because I informed him about this, and he is talking to Sir Stephen Howe. But I feel we need to, within the Lothians, really take this much more serious. And I know there's great intention, and the police is doing a wonderful job. But, when they catch somebody absolutely red-handed, they can't lock him up. It is just unreal. It is very depressing.
Thanks. Well, clearly we do have the plans for the Rural Crime Initiative, and I do appreciate the frustrations that the councillor expresses, and I think we touched on those last time too, that the particular approaches by the wider kind of criminal justice system as to finding a longer term solution. I'm sure that colleagues in the Community Justice Authority would have a comment about the efforts to reduce reoffending and have that longer term approach to actually break the cycle of offending. But we are very aware of the impact of rural crime, and certainly have the plans there, and will be devoting the resources to address that in the coming year. And I suppose I would just pick up one word that the councillor said about any temptation for vigilante activity, I think should be resisted strongly, because whilst you might not agree, the danger will be that those engaged in what they perceive as well-motivated activity will find themselves on the wrong side of the law.
Okay. Happy to agree with the report. Okay. That takes us to item 8, which is the performance report April to March.
Okay, thank you. Again, you've got a table in front of you which is of varying value, I'm sure, to see. But what we have at the top is a detection rate for groups 1 to 5. So that is basically all the sorts of crime that we would be interested in here. Everything from violence to crimes of indecency, break-ins, vandalisms, fire-raising, the whole range of reported crime. And the detection rate there, as you'll see, is a bit healthier than it was last year. It's just shy of half of all reported crime that is being solved. We have seen a slight increase in reported crime across this area. And when I say a slight increase, certainly for this division as a whole, it's a 5% increase for Midlothian. It's slightly smaller than that. It is a trend, actually, across the country, and in part it can be attributed to some of the more self-generated activity that we can go on to mention, but certainly you'd see in the national press that Police Scotland has set its stall out pretty clearly about domestic abuse in particular and reducing violent crime, also about tackling serious sexual crime, and with both of those comes an increase actually in reporting, which is to be welcomed, but means that it manifests in an increase in levels of recorded crime overall. And so moving on to that priority of protecting people, the indicator there is about a detection rate for crimes of domestic abuse, and you'll see there that it is actually slightly less for this area than it was for the same period last year. In part, it is attributed to the increase that I mentioned. This area is actually, it becomes a bit meaningless to talk in percentage terms because the increase is so much. It's actually 145% up on what it was last year. So 492 more victims of domestic abuse have reported crimes. So although there is that slight drop to the detection rate, I think you'll appreciate that over 78% solved is still a good solve rate, and is still, you can see that with the increase in reports that would have an effect on the numbers that are detected. So moving on then to the detection rate for sexual crime, that again is on target. I do appreciate that with both of these areas of work, it doesn't sound right to describe anything other than 100% as a good return. However, over 81% does represent a huge amount of effort and work on the part of the teams to gather the evidence necessary to prove cases for suspects for sexual crime. And again, whilst this area, actually Midlothian, hasn't seen an increase in sexual crime, nationally there's been a fairly significant increase, over 12% increase in sexual crime, and in this division over 25% actually increase in sexual crime. In part, that's an increase in one particular category. So we've seen reports of rape increase markedly over this past year. And I would say that is a lot to do with the creation of the National Rape Task Force. And with that, the divisional, we in this division have a divisional rape investigation unit. Allied to that, we have a National Domestic Abuse Task Force and a Divisional Domestic Abuse Investigation Unit. And between them, those two strands of activity are uncovering a lot more, particularly rapes. So that more intense engagement with victims of domestic violence is bringing forward more disclosures of sexual violence over many years. So we are seeing that affect the figures, but again I would say that is actually something to be welcomed, that at least these reports are coming to the fore and they are being dealt with and the perpetrators are being dealt with appropriately. Priority 2 in reducing antisocial behaviour. This is a positive picture for this area. We've actually decreased by 454 incidents against the same period last year. A lot of that's down to the targeting of repeat offenders for antisocial behaviour and targeting hotspot areas, and those are identified through the weekly partnership tasking and coordinating group that Midlothian enjoys, as well as the antisocial behaviour monitoring group. So very much not just police resources, but other agencies, environmental health, community safety, housing, the fire service, any legal avenues that we can explore, all combining to enjoy this decrease in the number of antisocial behaviour reports. We are also seeking to increase the detection rate for hate crime, and certainly seeking to increase reports as well as awareness and willingness grows to come forward and know that reports will be taken seriously by the authorities. So we have seen an increase in Midlothian. We had 103 hate crimes reported to us for the year to date. I think that's taken us up to the 16th of March. And that is 32 more crimes than were reported over the same period last year. No, 32 more. So I'd like to think that is in part due to the partnership work with the Council to raise awareness locally, to encourage reporting from local businesses. Sadly, we still see that kind of point of sale report where some of our black and minority ethnic community members in that environment are subjected to abuse when perhaps it's age-restricted products from people trying to purchase alcohol. When they're refused, people resort to that racial type of abuse, and that's a kind of recurring type of hate crime that we do see. We are pleased to see an increase in reports, and clearly hope that that is indicative of the level of confidence the communities have that we will be able to do something about it. But with that increase in reporting, we have to match it with an increase in solve rate, so when people report it they can see that there's actually a product from that. So you can see there that it's an over 80% solve rate, which again I would suggest is a really positive one. Moving on to reducing violence, we are seeing the figures there actually are slightly misleading. Those figures are the detection rate for violence, which is strong, but to give you figures on the reduction of actual prevalence of violence or reported violent crime, in Midlothian we are a very small decrease, 2 crimes down in overall violent crime, so 101 crimes in 2013-14. The murders, attempt murders, again down slightly. We've had 5 this year, and serious assaults we've had 36, which is quite a reduction actually from last year when we had 10 more. We had 46. So I think again with violent crime that's a good reduction, and that is replicated actually across the division. Stop searches, this is a figure about the prevalence of carrying offensive weapons, including knives. So you'll see that this is quite a small portion, the 6.7% positive, and moving to the next area, item 10, is the rate that's just approaching 17% for the drug searches. And we've talked already about the intention behind using that target. Increase in licensed premises visits, again that the intention of carrying out that activity is to tackle the alcohol misuse more than drug misuse, and make sure that our licensed premises are working with us to keep drinking responsible. We're working with Best Bar None and other initiatives so that licensees carry out their responsibilities to run safe premises. The 5th priority, making the roads safer. There's some statistics there again. I know that for the year to come, the target will be for Police Scotland will be about reducing the number of people killed or seriously injured on our roads. I think this year you've probably talked at previous meetings about some of the indicators for that, and you know, there are reasons for looking at drink driving, looking at speeding. Clearly, seat belts affects the seriousness of injury if there is a collision. So all of these activities will still be looked at in the road safety category, but the overall target will be to see that reduction in casualties, whether they be seriously injured or killed. We have had sadly three more fatal serious road casualties this year. We've had 30 this year compared with the previous year. We've had one less that has been fatal, so only 3 in this year. Obviously, one person's too many, but we've seen 3 in the year killed on the roads in Midlothian as opposed to 4 last year. And the actual number of collisions is about the same. It's 1 more than it was last year. As far as the less serious collisions or the slightly injured, there were 208 people slightly injured on the roads in Midlothian this year, and that is 34 fewer than the previous year. As regards the children injured, which is a particular target for us, we have unfortunately had 4 children seriously injured this year. Thankfully, none of whom succumbed to those injuries. Last year, sadly, one child did die, and 3 were seriously injured. So, as I say, that really is the target for us, is about reducing any injuries or fatalities on the road. You can see there some of the statistics about drink driving and speeding that are all to that end. Priority 6, tackling serious organised crime. We're really interested in the cash seizures and restraining property that's been obtained through the activities of serious organised crime. In this year to date, we've got, just over £450,000 seized, and some assets, just £415,000 net assets reported for possible restraint. So that is an area, I know that there's no actual figures in there, but that is an area of focus going forward for next year in tackling the serious organised crime, and kind of goes hand in hand with the number 16 there of the drug supply figures. I think I said last time, and certainly I can confirm today, that local drug dealing will be a priority for next year, which is in addition to the priorities from last time, and it is particularly for this division that drug dealing has been accepted as a priority going forward, because that's responding to the feedback we're getting from communities. And really, I'm talking about the sorts of dealing that people see going on in their streets, in their estate, and the antisocial behaviour that can accompany that, with people coming and going. And I certainly believe strongly that it's important to demonstrate to communities that we are listening to that and we're actually responding and doing something about it. And again, along with the work being done upstream, if you like, for the more serious and organised elements of drug dealing, if we do our bit locally about how that actually affects communities, then that should have a positive effect overall.
I think it's certainly encouraging that, there's almost twice as many detections for domestic abuse as there were reported incidents last year, and that can't go without notice. And across the board, there does seem to be a general level of increased reporting. Would that tend to be seen as an increased confidence in people coming forward because of the higher levels of successful outcomes, perhaps?
Well, we very much hope so. I mean, we wouldn't be in any way complacent about that, or thinking that you know we're by any means getting everything right. But I do think that there's been a huge momentum about tackling violence, particularly domestic violence, and tackling serious sexual crime, and that there have been a number of publicity campaigns as well as regular reporting. Again, I would say some of it is, there is a kind of analogy with the drugs activity. Some of it's police generated because we are putting more resources in, so we're getting more reports out, if you see what I mean. And I talked before about that more intense engagement with victims. That then brings its own results, because people tell friends and tell other people that they have had a good service from the police, and then hopefully that encourages them to come forward. And because there's more effort being put, more training being directed towards victims of domestic violence and sexual crime, then we're uncovering a lot more reports of things that have happened going back a number of years. And not only that, we're then going on to look at perhaps previous partners of the same offender and actually approaching individuals and asking if they wish to report. So there's an element of proactivity there that's reflected in the figures also.
Chair, one of the issues that came up over the weekend, I don't know if you've seen it in the press, was, and I'm highlighting this as a co-opted member of the policing board, was around the perception around scrutiny of policing being in crisis, and that was the way it was phrased in the Scotland and Sunday, I think it was. And obviously performance reporting is at the heart of that, and I'm wondering whether, not for today, but whether there's something that board members could maybe explore in terms of how that performance report, which has been fantastic verbally, but whether it could be presented to illustrate that commitment to scrutiny, you know, whether it be graphs, trends and so on, in a way that provides that information that really stands up to that accusation that was levelled at policing boards in the media at the weekend. That's not a criticism of this particular board, it's an issue that was raised more widely. I think the performance report was excellent, but I think there's maybe a bit more graphic information that we might need from Police Scotland centrally around trends around violence, acquisitive crime and so on, that we might need to explore over time, which would be really helpful. I concur with the Commander around the increase in confidence, around, particularly when it's not just about gender-specific challenges, but, for example, violence against women and girls, but also in terms of the impact on other minority communities, such as hate crime. And I think the targeting, for example, of repeat offenders that the Commander explored is extremely positive, in that hopefully it will keep those repeat offenders around antisocial behaviour from coming into the justice system over time. So actually they're not coming into the remit of the criminal justice social work and other partners. So I welcome the report, but I think we can maybe help Police Scotland to stand up to that allegation, if you like, that was made in the media over the weekend around the information provided to support scrutiny of performance.
Is that something we can look at?
Thank you. Yeah, it is absolutely a good point that there are those minded to be critical of the new arrangements, and I'm sure that's the same for any organisation that's undergone the extent of change and transition that Police Scotland has done. I know that from the centre there is a real desire to demonstrate to the public more widely that there's actually more scrutiny now than really ever before. I mean, you know, people around this table are aware that I've previously reported to Police Board in the previous arrangements, and obviously that was a much smaller environment with much less actual engagement from the wider community and councillors. So I know that Police Scotland will be keen to emphasise the rigour that can now be shown right across 32 local authority areas, with participation from elected members right across the political spectrum in a way that arguably the previous structure didn't allow.
Yeah, just to concur there that I think there is more scrutiny now, and the accusations that go about that there is less scrutiny just don't hold up. And we have in Midlothian the opposition who refuse to take part in this set-up that we have now to be able to scrutinise the police and the fire board for that matter. Can I just ask, did I hear the figure right for the cash seizures? Was it £450,000 you said, yeah? Did I hear that?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Thank you.
Well, I find these figures fascinating, and I'm very encouraged by it. It would have been so helpful if we would have had attached to this page the briefing page that the commander was reading from, because it's very difficult to really grasp all the impact of the figures. I just think that 5,678 cases of antisocial behaviour incidents, while it's down by 7.4%, is still a staggering number of antisocial behaviour incidents. I just can't get my mind around it, that in Midlothian alone, 5,678 antisocial behaviour incidents occurred. When you talk about the year to date, how long is that year gone? Is that 3 months, 9 months?
To the 16th of March. So that's almost
a whole year.
A full year. Yeah.
A whole year. And then one other thing, the increase, the proportion of positive stop and search drive. This has gone up from 16.9, from 8.9. That is a bigger change than 8%. That is, in my opinion, 100% change or 50% change. I can't understand why it's 8%.
Someone can't count.
Sorry, Chair. It was maybe picking up on Rob's point, actually. And of course, we had a dedicated training session on scrutiny in the past couple of months. But equally, it's a valid point in terms of the range of information that has been shared with members over the past year, that we maybe make use of our analyst to depict that in a graph form, so there is that trend analysis for the year that Police Scotland and indeed Fire Scotland have been in place, with a compilation of the range of information that has been submitted to us each quarter. So it's maybe depicted a lot more easily there as to what the graph will interpret. It's sometimes easier in pictures than numbers.
Thanks, Kevin. With that,
could I make a quick comment? It was just, Chair, to say that totally welcoming Police Scotland's focus on domestic abuse and violent crime. I think what is important to realise is that it is having a knock-on effect on other services. So, for instance, since the new year, our number of court reports being requested by the courts and orders made has really increased exponentially. I can't actually give you the figures, and it kind of makes sense in relation to Police Scotland coming in the 1st of April and how long things take to kind of get through the court process, that the number, we're really starting to see the difference now. So I suppose it's just reminding the board that there is a knock-on effect in other agencies. I know that the Scottish Court Service is saying that there's a lot more delays now in things coming to courts, taking longer and longer, just because of the sheer volume. So it's important to remember that, although it's very positive, it has an impact on other agencies as well as police in terms of the volume of work that people are then having to cope with. Thanks.
Is that something we could perhaps get a report on, maybe to the next or a future board, just have a look at some of the knock-on effects there, because obviously this board has that wider remit, so the ability to look at this in a sort of slightly bigger picture. So perhaps if we could have a report to a future meeting on that I think would be quite useful, and it would focus board attention on the sort of the bigger picture there, I think. Okay. With that, we're happy to note that report. Sorry.
More important comments have been made already, but just on a minor league, I'm slightly curious, is this statistical table taken from something bigger in the sense of the left-hand column, 7 and 10, there's a couple of numbers that don't appear. I'm just curious about that one. And also on a minor league, we can all appreciate serious injury and minor injury, but what's the criteria by which these figures are generated?
Thank you. Yeah, these figures are generated from a national report, and in part that's the reason why I'm not providing a wider briefing note. I do have some notes to which I'm referring when I'm trying to interpret the figures for members and hopefully make them meaningful. But that SCOMIS there is an acronym really of and I'm going to test myself as to what it stands for, but it's the Scottish, and it's something Management Information System. I'm just trying to remember what the O is, but you know, it is a software that aims to capture all this data right across Scotland, and then to break it down by divisional area and then further by local authority area. And the intranet is obviously our internal internet, if you like. Some of the data isn't captured on that SCOMIS system and is collated on the police intranet, and that's why it's a combination of both. And one of the challenges that clearly we've still got going into year 2, and I hopefully won't have going into year 3, is the amalgamation of the legacy IT systems for police forces. So in the past, the 8 different police forces in Scotland had, as difficult as that is to believe, 8 different IT systems, and therefore there is still a legacy issue for Police Scotland to overcome, to find a means of collating all the data that divisions record on legacy force systems, if that makes sense. As regards the question about how we differentiate between slightly injured or seriously injured, I'm afraid I'll have to I could answer it as regards serious assault and common assault and anything in the crime world, but the roads policing is probably my weakest subject. So I would need to defer to colleagues about how we actually differentiate. Certainly in terms of common or petty assault and serious assault, it's an issue of the presence of fractures or disfigurement. And I would expect, but as I say, I would need to check. I suspect a similar list of criteria will apply for what constitutes slight and serious injury.
Okay, colleagues happy to note the performance report. Okay, thank you. Which takes us then on to item 9, which is the local fire and rescue plan for Midlothian.
Thank you. Just to make everyone aware, I'm sure you are all aware that the fire and rescue plan for Midlothian was agreed at full council last week, so thank you very much for that. And I'm short and sweet for us today. Just to let members know why there's no performance report, the way our national recording system works is that we don't get qualified data until 30 days after the end of the month. So rather than bring an improvised report here, we thought we'd wait until the next meeting and bring it forward then. Thank you.
Any questions on the report? I mean, yeah, as Dean said, it did go through council last week. I think we still need to formally sign off. We've got the council to agree, but we formally sign off the plan. So, are colleagues happy to do so? Short and sweet indeed. Thanks. Which takes us on to item 10, which is the Public Protection Service redesign. Kevin.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of the report is to inform the Safer Communities Board of the innovative new arrangements for public protection across East and Midlothian local authority areas. This has been recognised that the structures in public protection have developed separately over time, whilst the reality for most of service users is that their needs span more than one category. For example, in the report we depict that many children or adults at risk of harm live in households where domestic violence is also an issue, as was referenced earlier in the scrutiny reporting. Also, in the current structures that we have, the number of committees have multiple attendance by a lot of the same people at senior management level. Whilst the public protection agenda is growing, there is that recognition that all partner agencies have agreed to establish a project to address these overlaps across the different areas of public protection and to streamline those structures into a single public protection committee. That will consist of the agencies listed in 2.4 in the report, whilst CSOG, which is the Critical Services Oversight Group, will continue to provide the necessary governance and scrutiny across both local authority areas, as this consists of chief officers in the CSOG group. In addition to this, there will be one standing subgroup which will focus on performance and quality, and that will have the responsibility for developing and implementing a framework for staff evaluation, audit and scrutiny of those activities, including the management of the governance of case reviews and capturing the learning into practice across all the public protection areas. The lead officer will have responsibility for ensuring the quality assurance systems. There will also be an offender management group, as there is currently, which will be maintained to ensure the governance and the links with frontline activity. As is indicated in 2.8 on the report, the public protection team will be co-located in an operational hub at Brunton Hall in Musselburgh, with staff presence from those respective agencies of social work, police and health to take forward the integrated approach in public protection. As indicated at 2.9, MELDAP staff will also be co-located within the public protection team, and the project is on target for implementation now in April of 2014. In terms of resource, as is listed in 3.1, the existing joint posts are being brought together to form the core of the public protection team under a public protection team manager. And this is expected to increase efficiency and provide more opportunities for integrated response and support operational staff in those partner agencies to improve the outcomes for clearly vulnerable service users. Which leads me to the recommendations at 5, which is for the Board to note the report and support these new arrangements for the collective public protection across East Lothian and Midlothian local authority areas. The structure for each in turn is depicted in the background papers at Appendix 1 for the public protection structure itself, and in Appendix 2 for the governance bodies in relation to those operational arrangements. I'm happy to pause for any questions.
Thanks, Kevin. Certainly welcome the report. I think the removal of duplication and the need to attend multiple meetings must be welcome to all. The proposal certainly seems sound, and if it's going to enhance working and create better working arrangements for those involved, I think certainly has to be supported. Have you got any questions or comments from colleagues?
Yeah, on 2.5, you refer to the core agencies. Who are the core agencies?
These, Councillor, would be social work, police and health. Currently that's constituted through adult protection, child protection and offender management and violence against women agencies.
Sorry, where do they fit into your scheme?
Appendix 1.
Okay.
They would be detailed at 2.4 in the paper.
Yeah, but on your screen, on your...
Oh, in the appendix, sorry, I misunderstood.
It's page 74.
Yes, yes.
Just help me out.
That is
I know it's clear to you, but it's not clear to
Well,
me.
no, I wouldn't suggest that. But at the right-hand side of that appendix, under CSOG, at the top in the box, CSOG, underneath that, in the line underneath that is the East and Midlothian Public Protection Committee, and this is where those agencies, which have got the acronyms of APC, which is the Adult Protection Committee, CPC, which is the Child Protection Committee, and so on, as listed in 2.4, are all contained in that line management responsibility there.
Can I register my support for this proposal? I actually think it's quite groundbreaking in terms of not only collaboration across areas, but in terms of the bringing together a strategic approach around the key areas of public protection. So I would want to register my support for that. I do think that the mainstreaming, if you like, of MARAC within this is particularly important, and you know, with the focus that Police Scotland are now placing on violence against women, or domestic abuse, sorry, I know the terminology gets mixed up, and the fact that other public sector partners are getting behind that, that risk assessment approach is really important. So I'd just like to register my support for this proposal.
Thanks, Rob. We have recommendations set out at section 5. Are members happy to accept these? Okay. Thank you. That then takes us to item 11, Midlothian Community Safety Partnership funding for 2014-15. Rosie.
Okay, so the purpose of this report is to provide a summary of the proposed procedure for distributing the funding for 2014-15. This report's already been sent to the Community Safety Delivery Group, who have agreed this procedure and are happy to drive forward with it. I'll just cover some of the key points of this. This is the last year, or we're anticipating this will be the last year of the Community Safety Fund, because it's going to be absorbed into a wider grants process for the Council as a whole. The budget for this year has been significantly cut, down by 30%, £30,000 to £41,100. So we've got a lower budget than we've had last year. To kind of accommodate this, what we've done is we've looked at the ring-fence funding. Last year we had a range of projects that were ring-fenced, so we've taken a number of those projects out and we've cut the ring-fence funding down to the +1 project, which is pre-committed, so we have to fund that, and the Tomorrow's Driver funding. So that's to ensure that those two projects can run on as they're kind of pre-committed. That leaves us with a remaining budget of £34,000, and we've got a plan for place budget which is down from £10,000 to £5,000. And that's our budget for the delivery group to run kind of smaller projects as demand occurs throughout the year. So that's our kind of responsive budget. That leaves us with £29,000 to open up to partners and the public for bids. So it's proposed that we follow a similar procedure to last year. We've got a similar application form. We have tightened up the criteria, which I've covered in the report. Basically, the criteria links in with the partnerships, key outcomes that we're striving to achieve, and our priority areas. So we're asking all applicants to show how their project will demonstrate and help us achieve those. We're proposing that we follow the co-production approach that we had last year, with a panel meeting to review and agree which projects should receive funding. Now, with the timing of these projects and the timing of their next board meeting, it's not going to be possible for us to come to the board with proposals for which projects should be funded. So what we're asking in this paper is, are the board happy for us to do that via email? So the idea is that the co-production panel will meet by the end of May. So we'll come to the board either at the end of May or during the beginning of June with a list of proposed projects, and we'll just ask via email for any objections to that. And then obviously we'll come to the board meeting in August with a detailed report, and that will provide a full evaluation of the 13-14 projects which we funded, and it will show you a list of the projects funded for 14-15. So that's a summary of the report. I'll open that up to questions and just ask if the board's happy to agree this procedure.
Thanks, Rosie. I think certainly the suggestion to agree by email makes a lot of sense. One question, are we taking account, because I can remember in previous years some projects that have been funded didn't submit evaluations. Will that be taken into account when considering any funding bids that they might put in for this round?
Yeah, we've provided a clear procedure document, and it does state that if you've not provided evaluation in the past, then that will affect your funding application for this year. We've also asked in the past year that funding evaluation reports are submitted within a number of weeks of the project concluding. So that means that we've already had a significant amount of evaluation information in, whereas in previous years we've waited months till after the year end for that. So we've got a lot tighter with that.
I think it is. It's something we need to be quite clear on, and I'm glad we are, because I think there's significant amounts of money going to support very, very useful projects, but if we don't get any feedback or evaluation on what the project's achieved, there's no way we can know if it's actually been worthwhile as putting the money into that. So it's encouraging to hear that. Robert?
I don't disagree with the process for this year. I just wanted to put a heads up for the feedback that we had from the improvement service around the need to support a more integrated approach to neighbourhood management in Midlothian, and I wonder whether these resources in the following years is maybe something that could encourage a more participatory budgeting type approach at neighbourhood level with communities and with partners at neighbourhood level to solve the problems in those areas. Not for this, but it's just a heads up to think about for the future.
It's certainly something I'm personally very supportive of. I think it's the direction of travel. It's where we're going to have to eventually get to. So it's just a case of how quickly we get there and what budgets can be made available for community decision making. Have you got any other questions or comments? We're happy to agree the report. Thank you. That then takes us on to item 12, which is a presentation by Rob on the reoffending performance.
A couple of caveats that we had last year. First of all, a lot of the data is on the basis of court coverage. So Midlothian is linked into Edinburgh in terms of the performance. And we don't have data on a court level that actually goes down to a Midlothian level. So that's one frustration that we might need to resolve in the future. The second issue is that I'm going to talk about themes that would seem maybe abstract but are really important from a Midlothian point of view, and I'll cover things like women in the justice system and young people and so on. And I've also updated the briefing that we circulated last year, which members thought was really helpful in terms of telling the story of offending and reoffending. What I would say is that we don't have performance information that is real time. And what I mean by that is it takes about 1.5 years for somebody to go through the system, be convicted, and then that comes through the system. So we don't have real time data. What we do have is proxy data. So if you think about violence, you think alcohol is a key driver for violence. 50% of violent crimes alcohol related. Acquisitive crime is about 60% drug related. So the whole substance misuse challenge is key to that. And what we would say, and what will be brought out here, is that where you see increases in acquisitive crime in real time, you will see increases in reoffending. So our reoffending performance has been, our reoffending has reduced consistently, not fast enough, not far enough, But as acquisitive crime increases across Scotland, which we are seeing, then the reoffending rate, you can bet your mortgage that the reoffending rate will also increase across Scotland, and that's likely to come out in the next year or two. So in terms of, and I showed you this slide last year, it's a very rocky road, it's a very rocky river we're on at the moment, and that to me illustrates the partners. I wonder whether we're all in the same boat or not, but we're certainly going through the rapids at the moment, not just in terms of reform of community justice, but reform of individual justice partners and individual community partners. And I think the one key message I would say about this is that this needs to be a community planning partnership. The community planning partnership needs to be this boat going down the rapids, everybody going in the same direction, everybody sticking together to get through the choppy waters. And partnership is the essence of reducing reoffending. And we did ask last year, or you did ask of me last year, that the briefing that we provided should have more of a policing slant. So I've tried to do this. And the Chief Constable recognises that partnerships are key to safer communities. So it's not about just what the police can do, but also what other partners can do. So from a policing perspective, and this is not to pick on Police Scotland colleagues, this is about policing as a concept. Why should policing be on board with reducing reoffending? Why should it get behind reducing reoffending? Well, first of all, we can't arrest our way out of housebreaking problems, because they're just going to go through the system and come back out again. It's the same with other volume crime. No one partner has all the intelligence and information around the problems that society is trying to solve. A good example would be recorded violent crime. Anything between 30 and 50% of recorded violent crime is held by the police. The NHS probably have more recorded violent crime in A&E than what the police have in terms of recorded violence. No single partner has the capacity or capability or expertise to address the community safety problems that we have in Scotland. So it's unfair to put reoffending performance at the feet of the police or the NHS or anybody specifically, social work. It's about all partners having that capacity, resources and expertise to get behind it. And the solutions don't all lie elsewhere. So, for example, what is the point of arresting somebody for housebreaking where they've been, where they may be doing it to feed a drug habit or so on, but NHS doesn't get them into drug treatment quickly enough and effectively enough and get them into the recovery system? Then you find that the courts, police and everybody else has to deal with the consequence of the NHS being able to, or unable, if you like, to get effective recovery in place for prolific offenders. So again, you can't just blame policing or NHS or whatever. It's about working together around shared priorities. And just, and I've put it in the briefing, but just to remind you of what we were talking about last year, about individuals receiving custody are 10 times more likely to have been a regular truant, 13 times more likely to be unemployed, 8 times more likely of drug and alcohol problems, 13 times more likely of personality disorders, and 2.5 times more likely to have a family member who's been convicted of an offence, and 6 times more likely to have been a young father. So these are the people that are in custody. These are the life chances, the life dynamics that we continue to explore in terms of reoffending. And this is not about promoting the CJA, it's about promoting the fact that we have seen a consistent reduction in reoffending in Scotland over the last, or certainly since 2008-2009. You will see that overall that the improvement has been continued across most areas, certainly in Lothian and Borders. And just some of the facts and figures we were talking about last year, just to give you an update on that. 66%, now there's an offender population of about 20,000 in Lothian and Borders. 66.4% of offenders in Lothian and Borders live in Edinburgh and Midlothian, but Edinburgh and Midlothian only has 59.3% of the population. So you've got a higher rate of offenders in Edinburgh and Midlothian than what you do as population. So for example, in the Scottish Borders, Scottish Borders population is about 12% of the Lothian and Borders population, and it's got 12% of the offender population. So it's, what you want to try and do is try and reduce the offender population as a proportion. The peak age for reconvictions for men is under 21, 35.9%. For women, the peak age is between 26 and 30. While those aged 21 to 25 have a reconviction rate of 26.9%, and we've got about 90 to 95 people a month leaving prison and coming back into Lothian and Borders from prison with a substance misuse problem. So again, it highlights the dynamics and the need for the health system to get behind this challenge, not just policing and other partners. The other thing which is interesting there is about the gender dynamic. If you look at the peak age for women being 26 to 30, the trend or the cycle seems to have been, or seems to be, women having abuse either as a child or as an adult, substance misuse, offending. And there's it's maybe an overgeneralisation, but there is that dynamic, and I wonder whether the fact that they've got a later age before they peak in offending, it's maybe for that experience to be brought out. In terms of where we are on our own performance, we have a national target, a Lothian and Borders target to be 5% below the national average by 2016. We are currently at 28.4% reconviction rate for Lothian and Borders. We would obviously want to be at 23.4%, but we're actually on track for that. We're 3% below the national average. We want to get to 5% below. What's made the most difference in terms of where we see the biggest performance improvement is, for example, the number of women in custody. You're seeing there, we had an average of 50 women in custody at any one time in May 2012 from Lothian and Borders. We're now at 39, but the key to this, which I'll bring up later, is that 10 of those 39 women are on remand. They're not actually sentenced for an offence that they've committed. And there is a dynamic, which I'm sure Margaret will tell you about, around the increase in demand, increase in remand for offenders across the board. Okay, we've done further research. Peter DeVink challenged me last year about the cost of offenders. So I took Peter's advice on board and I went back. We've done another update on that research. And we looked at the total place research again as it relates to prolific offenders. Now, on the basis of a prolific offender was defined by Glasgow anything between 2 and 9 offences a day, although they wouldn't get caught for all of those. But you can bet your bottom dollar, does it take them long to get caught and then come back into the system? But on the basis of 112 crimes per year, the average cost to society of one prolific offender is 179k, which is 3,500 a week. So the community planning partnership, if you like, for Midlothian has probably got a bill of £3,500 a week for each prolific offender that lives in Midlothian. We estimate that the 200 most prolific offenders in Lothian and Borders, which was around about 1% of the offender population, cost £35.6 million a year. But if we were to have a partnership approach around mentoring, for example, for those prolific offenders, it would cost £600k a year. So you're talking about a 1.6% of the cost. If we could, it's basically a social investment argument. If we could pool 600k from community safety partners and justice partners to get behind those 200, you would make a hell of a dent in the savings to society. But that's something for community planning partnerships to think of going forward. And the point which I was trying to hint at earlier was around the type of offending. So if you look at the offenders who commit lower level, high volume crimes, they've got a much higher reconviction rate. And if they have a reconviction rate that is much higher, then that translates into a higher rate of reoffending. So it's not the small numbers of high-impact crimes that have an impact on reoffending rates. It's the small number of high-volume, or the large number of high-volume crimes. And if you look at the reconviction rate, reconviction frequency rates for those who commit crimes of dishonesty, for every 100 offenders, it's 91.7 offences. And the one-year reconviction rate is 42.1%. So you can say that 1 in 2 are likely to commit a crime within a year of coming out. Whereas if you look at offenders who have committed sexual crime, they've got the lowest reconviction rate, both in terms of frequency and in terms of the actual rate itself, with 10.7%. So some of it's fascinating. In terms of offenders convicted of crimes, had 1 year reconviction rate for 55% for shoplifters and housebreakers. So that's the point I'm making about if you have increases in housebreaking, shoplifting, then your reconviction performance, your reoffending performance as a partnership is going to deteriorate until you get a partnership response in place around those key challenges. And in terms of the disposals, obviously want to promote community payback, but DTTO, drug treatment testing orders, have the highest reconviction frequency rate, 64.8% reconviction rate for a drug treatment testing order. But that's right across the piece. That's an improvement. It was over 80%, 90% at one point. So it is improving. Conversely, the offenders given monetary or other disposals, fines and so on, 20.4%. So it depends on the length of the sentence. If you're serving a short sentence, your reconviction rate is really high because it's high volume crime. But it costs a fortune. It's an economic argument rather than a moral one. Well, it can be a moral one, but I'm not here to do that. In terms of the number of offenders convicted and reconvicted in Edinburgh and Midlothian, you will see the graph there over 6-7 years. What we don't know is whether that's a wave, that is continued backwards, or whether it's actually a consistent improvement in performance. I would hope it's a consistent improvement in performance, but I can't state categorically that it is. And the other reason for reforming CJAs is that performance should have been down further. That reconviction rate, that volume of reconviction should have been further and faster if you were going to illustrate that community justice was working effectively. It's obviously not going far enough, fast enough, and that's the reason for reform, and quite right too. And you can see here that the Edinburgh and Midlothian 1 year reconviction rates of all genders has sort of fluctuated between over 30% to just over 25% for 1 year reconviction rates. Good performance in terms of Scottish average, well under the Scottish average, but obviously more to do for all partners to get behind the reoffending challenge. And you'll see, this is the female reconviction rate, so you'll see a small reduction in the number of females that have been reconvicted. From 2005-6, around 200 women reconvicted. It's now about 160 or so on. So small numbers. If we're just about reoffending volume, you wouldn't focus on women in the justice system. It's more a societal issue, and the numbers aren't big enough. This is more about the societal challenge. And there's the reoffending rate, reconviction rate for women. Okay, under 21s, really good story to tell on the under 21s, and Margaret Brewer, who's here today, has been part of that really good story, because Margaret and her colleagues have been leading on the whole system approach for supporting young people at risk of being, coming into the justice system, and then making sure that proper interventions are in place around that. And I think the whole system approach, you'll see, I think it was 2009-10, you'll see that the improvement in reconviction rates for under 21s, the performance there has really improved over 3 or 4 years. But again, it's not up to date. It's too much of a time lag. But we're hoping that that will continue. And that's the 1 year reconviction rates. Again, you can see from its peak in 2005-06, there's been a reduction. And again, you can see the whole system approach having an impact on the under-18 performance there from 2004-05 to 2000, or certainly the range of interventions being improved. This is Lothian and Borders wide, so it's not specific to Midlothian. This is the distribution of male prisoners from Lothian and Borders. You'll see in the bottom right-hand corner there that there are 932 prisoners from Lothian and Borders in prison at the moment. Sorry, that was as of the 5th of March. We have an agreement at Addiewell, which is based in West Lothian, that they will house West Lothian prisoners to make rehabilitation more effective. And obviously Edinburgh are hosting most of the prisoners there. You can also see that in Pullman there is 64 from Lothian and Borders in Pullman. That is a reduction from 90, which we were up at 90 at one point. So we've seen a real reduction in the number of young people from Lothian and Borders into Pullman, and I think that's a positive thing. And that's the females. That's where the females are. 17 in Edinburgh, 12 in Compton Vale, and then I think the fact that 1 in 4 of the remand 1 in 4 of females in prison is on remand is pretty shocking, really. Why is that? Why is that happening? Is it because the community is perceived to be more or less therapeutic than the prison environment? I mean, what is it that's driving sentencers to put women in to put women on remand? Is it a protection issue? Current and emerging challenges: getting community and prison resources behind the offending challenge. A more integrated approach to intelligence, commission, performance improvement, empowering councils and communities to challenge and inform shared justice priorities. And I know that that's something that you're keen on as a leader, and I know that that's other councils say that to us as well. What is our role in the justice system? What is the role of local democracy in the justice system? I think there's an articulation or a narrative needs to be explored around that. And just some of the questions. Where do prolific offenders sit now? Where are they in terms of the priorities, given the fact that they take up so much resource, given the fact that they cost the justice system a fortune? I'll give you an example. Those 200 that we were talking about have been in court 6,000 times over the last 3 years. So why have we not got a system in place for these high volume, high demand individuals? And it's not a moral argument, it's an economic argument for best use of public resources. And how should we work around it? What does that mean for the politics of place and neighbourhood management? Can we get neighbourhoods behind the reoffending challenge? Because I think that particular aspect of offender management's maybe been not maybe been as explored as what it could be. So that's where we are, and happy to take any questions on that. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Rob. I think certainly it's a lot of information, a lot of very useful information. Certainly gives us a lot to think about. Questions, comments, Peter?
Fascinating report. Would it be possible for us to see the slides that were shown, because they are not in this document that we were given? And I also want to come back on some very disturbing facts on page, it's not numbered, but it is page, it starts off with prolific and persistent offenders. 69% of people convicted in Scotland court had 5 or more previous convictions. That is just shocking. That is a very, very disturbing point. And then you go below it, the top 50 offenders in Lothian and Borders. You put in brackets 0.35. Is that 0.35 of the population?
0.35% of the offender population.
Of the offender population?
The offender population, yeah.
And they represent for 7.7% of the crimes. My goodness, I mean, that is just very, very serious. Very pleasing that there are no women in those 50 offenders. Yeah. Such a relief. But, you know, it is very worrying. And what can we do? What is it? You know, it's all very well looking at these figures, but I'm asking myself, what can we do to deal with it? Because in the end of the day, we need to resolve that problem, because it's really so completely crazy that you have 50 people responsible for 7.7% of the crimes. The police no doubt knows every one of them. But what can we do to stop them reoffending? I'd like to discuss that.
Well, Margaret's a social worker, so she could probably Margaret's the social worker, so she could probably give you that perspective. In terms of what I think, which I hope Margaret would agree with, and then I'll ask Margaret to answer it. What we need around prolific offenders is, I think, is to make their offending lifestyle incredibly uncomfortable. But to make sure that when they want or when they need the treatment, the support to change that lifestyle, that it's there at that point. Because you'll probably find, I said that the 200 went through court 6,000 times. Those 200 have probably been in prison 600 times over the last 3 years. They've probably failed drug treatment maybe 200 times. You know, it's a plethora of impacts on public resources that is completely lacking in coordination. And it often falls at the, it's often perceived to fall at the feet of either social work or the police. But the key to particularly driving improvement in prolific offenders is effective drug treatment and recovery. So the alcohol and drug partnership is really key to this. And it's whether that approach, whether we can get a more integrated approach to recovery, which Margaret and her colleagues have already put in place around that risk and recovery model. There's already mentoring in place, but what we don't have is effective coordination across all public sector partners to focus on these most prolific offenders, if you like, because they're really a pain in the backside, to be honest with you. They're not the easiest people to deal with. They're pretty difficult people, and it's pretty challenging to get public sector partners to get a coordinated approach behind them. Margaret.
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of things. I mean, I suppose to do it kind of chronologically within somebody's life. Rob mentioned the whole system approach, which is obviously about trying to catch people really young before they're old enough to be in the adult court system. It's not actually me that's leading on it in Midlothian, it's Children and Families, Christine Schaefer, that's leading on whole systems. But that's actually really crucial in relation to actually stopping people from becoming prolific offenders in the first place and stopping people from ending up within the criminal justice, the adult criminal justice system, like preventing that from actually happening at all. I mean, I think beyond that, I've got a thing in Lothian and Borders called the Reintegration Protocol, which is for the slightly older age group of 18 to 21-year-olds who are coming in or going into Polmont, the Young Offenders Institution, and it's a different way of working with them that kind of mirrors the whole systems approach, which is for up to 18-year-olds. Right. So there's whole systems to prevent people getting involved in the criminal justice system in the first place. There's the Reintegration Protocol. As Rob mentioned, in Edinburgh and Midlothian, we have now commissioned an offender recovery service, which starts today. In fact, I realise it is today. which has been commissioned. It's an organisation called Lifeline, who have got a huge amount of experience of working with offending behaviour and recovery issues south of the border. And this is going to replace voluntary through care, which is offering support to people coming out of short-term sentences, which most of them don't take up. It's about a 10% take-up rate. So it's to try and improve that take-up rate, but also the Lifeline organisation are going to get involved with people at an earlier stage in the system in the court cells in terms of what's called arrest referral. So you actually try and get people linked up with drug and alcohol services at the point of arrest when they're appealing from custody in court. And also they're going to be engaging with people who are remanded in custody as well. And I mean, I think to end that bit in terms of chronology, there's also people who are on court orders like community payback orders. Now again, we don't have recent figures because it takes a long time to get through, but the last figures we've got I think are 9-10 figures, and there's an enormous difference in reoffending rates between people who successfully complete orders made by the court and people who don't successfully complete them and who breach. And I'm talking like twice the number of reconvictions amongst people who breach than people who successfully complete. And that's a real challenge for us in relation to how we hang on to these people who don't comply with court orders, because if we could really focus on that group, we could make a really significant impact on reoffending. And I suppose the only other note of caution that I would say is that this is Edinburgh and Midlothian figures. These figures that I've just told you about the difference between those who breach and those who don't, we do actually have for Midlothian. But in relation to the figures that Rob's obviously talking about, they're court figures, so they're Edinburgh and Midlothian figures rather than Edinburgh figures. So it's just important to bear that in mind. For instance, we have very few women in prison, and I'm not aware of any remand reports on women prisoners coming through in the last few months at all. It's likely that those reports are coming through in relation to women in Edinburgh.
Apologies, I should have made that clear, that in terms of women in prison at any one time, Midlothian's got between 4 and 6 women in prison at any one time. From Midlothian, you've probably got about 10 to 12 young people, maybe, in Pullman at any one time.
Yeah,
so the numbers are
roughly,
relatively
yeah.
small for Midlothian specifically.
Probably between about 7 and 10 in Pullman. So the numbers are small.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to add my support to the work that the Community Justice Authority do, trying to get underneath the reasons why people offend in the first place and then re-offend. In a previous role, I was involved in the Integrated Offender Management project in Edinburgh. I know that's evolved since, and I've just very recently had a presentation on how that's evolved to reach a wider cohort of offenders. It started its life as trying to get underneath acquisitive, repeat acquisitive crime, whereas now it's got a wider remit, and likewise using the Lifeline, I think it is, as opposed to SACRO having that intervention. So it's certainly something that I'm looking to learn more about and potentially bring to this area to try and see if we can work more with our core partners in order to reduce reoffending, because as Rob said at the start of the presentation, we can't arrest our way out of it, as tempting as that is. Simply arresting people and putting them to jail isn't actually getting us anywhere. We're just delaying and in fact compounding some of the issues. Then they come back out and manifest in more serious ways in the community. So certainly from police side, that's something that we would be seeking to develop here locally.
Okay, I think if we could get the presentation emailed down to us all, that would be, I think, very useful for us all. Certainly very useful, I think, for all of us to have that. And there's a lot of areas in there I think we can look at. And as you say, I mean, if there is a way we can find a pot of money it certainly over time would save us significantly more. Maybe there is something we need to look at there on a wider scale than just within Midlothian alone, but certainly something we can look to take forward, I would hope. So thank you again. I think with that, if there are no other questions or comments, I'd simply thank all for attending today. Look forward to the next meeting in August.
Before we do that, Chairman, I want to thank both the Fire Brigade and the police for all the enormous effort they put into producing this. For only 3 of us, Mr. Baxter is very sorry that he couldn't be here himself. But again, I want to express, and I want this minuted, please, that I am most upset that the Labour Party still refuses to send members of their group to attend this board. I think it is an appalling state of affairs. It is a dereliction of their duty. Please take note of this, Mr. Secretary, and that I feel we need to tackle this because we can't go on, and I would like to, we can't tell the police not to do something, but it is really awful that they then have to go and repeat all what they're stating here for the Labour group. It is just morally, utterly wrong.
I think, Peter, I tend to agree it is unfortunate that members don't take up positions that they've been allocated on the committee. We cannot make anyone attend if they do not wish to. We keep the spaces open because I think ultimately, and maybe eventually we will get to a situation where we can have full representation, but I think it is appropriate that it's kept available to them in order that they hopefully do change their minds, but it certainly isn't particularly helpful when it does cause duplication, and I would certainly agree with that.
I consider it a waste of police time, which, as I understand it under the law, is a criminal offence.
With that, I think, thank you all for your attendance.